If you found this podcast, chances are you're a high achiever and you're successful. But now you're stuck and stressed, and you realize that everything you've created hasn't given you the fulfillment and the joy you thought it would. This is where we discuss the keys of high performance mindset and stepping into the next best version of yourself. Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast. Today we are joined by best-selling author, speaker, performance coach, and host of the One Hand at a Time podcast, Chris Welton. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. When people start saying the best-selling author and all these different things, like, man, this guy sounds pretty good. Then they say my name. I'm like, is that really me? It's still hard to grasp that concept, right? But thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I have been looking forward to having this conversation with you. And as we touched on when we spoke last about the podcast and the premise of the podcast being helping people tap in to their potential by realizing that they are truly stronger than they probably ever imagined. You know, and usually what I do is with our guests is I'll ask them to start back at the beginning to kind of give us a little backstory of their life. And usually that starts, in childhood. But without getting too much into your story, I mean, when we go back to the beginning, we are literally going back to the beginning.
Yeah, before the beginning.
Yeah.
Before the beginning of my story. So I was born, I'm the son of a drug addict. And my mom was addicted to heroin, which caused me to have the same issues when I was born. And I was born missing half my left arm and was born very premature, very small, which didn't last long. I'm 6'5", about 260 pounds now, so I'm a lot bigger than what they thought I was going to be.
Yeah.
So I was born with the cards stacked against me, right? I mean, it was just like, in today's environment, they probably would have taken me away from my mom and all these different things, but they didn't. I went home with my mom, and I was raised by a drug addict. And so lots of valuable lessons along that way. Lots of issues that still affect me today, not physically, but more mentally, growing up the son of that drug addict and being left multiple times, places all over the country, with family members or whatever, when she'd hop in and out of rehab. And so I have abandonment issues for sure. And I do my best to overcome them.
Right.
But you learn a lot growing up the son of a drug addict. I mean, I learned how to hustle at a young age, and I learned that if mom leaves, she might not be back for a couple weeks, right? So like there was that always happened. And I learned how to raise my little sister when I was very young, and I started working when I was 11 years old, and worked for a company called Junior Salesman. I was selling cookie and candies door to door when I was 11. I told them I was 13 so I could get the job, and that's how we made rent most of the time and paid a lot of our bills, and just survived. So I learned to survive at a young age, and I learned a lot of lessons and things I did not want to become or be. Right. And they talk about things being caught and not taught. And I caught a lot of things that I did not want to understand. I should have never had to understand the light bill at 11, but that was just how it worked. Right. I should have never had to understand that taking care of my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, at 11, which I know is a common story. You hear a lot of people talk about that, but those are things that I shouldn't have had to learn. Now, the flip side of that is it created me to be the person I am today. And I look back and I draw strength from the things I overcame at a young age.
Yeah. And
I use them on a daily basis right now to create the life that I have and the one that I enjoy. I could go on for hours, Ian, but I know that's not how long we have here. This isn't the Joe Rogan podcast yet anyway. So I'm happy to go deeper on that. But that's kind of where that is up to adolescence.
So let's start from there then at adolescence. And really for a lot of people, those struggles and those challenges would have become their kryptonite.
Yeah.
But for you in the long run, it's really, as you just mentioned, that's where you draw your strength from. So at that adolescent age, let's say teenage years, as you've had to hustle and you've had to literally grind and survive, at what point does all of those trials and tribulations maybe stop becoming an anchor for you, and you realize that they are actually the things that you can draw strength from?
Man, that's a great question. I think it was a lot later in life
Yeah.
that I realized that. And someone asked me the other day, it's amazing. You would be amazed the questions people ask you. Asked me a question about, was I surprised that I became successful? I was like, no, I wasn't surprised. That was a family member asked me this. And I said, no, I wasn't, because I knew I wanted to be the opposite of what I grew up in, right?
Yeah.
Like I knew I wanted to be somebody different than that. So when I realized that I actually had an advantage over a lot of people because I understood how to read people and survive. And those are skills that most people don't have today in today's world. I knew I had an advantage. Now, here's one of the advantages I did have. And I say this a lot from stage. I'm like, I'm not surprised where I am right now because my grandmother at a young age, my Nana, who I lived with a lot in between rehab stints and my mom, my Nana, God rest her soul, told me I was special, and I believed her. Okay? That's the difference, right? I believed her that I was special. So when people would kick me and I'd be down or things would happen, I was like, well, I'm special. Like, I'm going to get through this. And I don't know if she believed it or not, but she made me believe that I was special, right? So like, I still feel like I'm special, right? When it comes to certain things, and I'm here for a reason, right? So I was put through those things and challenging things to best be suited to help the people who are me now, right? Where I once was. So, yeah, and I use that a lot. I mean, gosh, I went through a lot of bad times and growing up as a kid too, and then became an adult, made some just ridiculous mistakes as an adult, but found ways to persevere. And I was about 40 before I realized that I was supposed to be helping more people than I was, and that someone had been showing me this way the whole time. I know this isn't a faith-based podcast, but someone's been showing me the way the whole time, and I just didn't see it.
Yeah. Before you got into your 40s and you were just going through life, dealing with your situations, what was it that kept you moving forward? Like what was it that was driving your persistence? Because there's a lot of people that would have been in that same situation who would have given up and not found themselves being able to accomplish things and moving the needle forward in terms of their life and success.
Well, this is probably an answer most people won't I guess, be okay. I don't know if it's okay with, but just won't be able to relate with, I guess. I wanted to be rich. Like, I wanted to make money because I thought money would solve all my problems. And I thought people that were rich didn't have problems. Right? Like, now, everybody has problems. They're just different. So I was this driving force to make money and to try to be somebody else, right? To have all these material things and chase money. And I made $1 million the first time when I was 27 years old. Okay. So like I went from being raised the son of a drug addict to doing my tax returns when I was 27, and it was over $1 million in net income. Right. So like that, to think about that is like, blows your mind, but that's what the driving force was. The more money I made, I thought I would be happier. And I never got to that point. I just had more things, right? Like I had the big house and all the cars. I wanted to be on MTV Cribs. I thought that's where I was headed, and I would literally take a backpack of like 50,000 in cash and fly to Vegas and go gamble all weekend. Like that's just what I did at 27 years old. So it was money. It was chasing money and not really thinking about my family around me or how me not being present was impacting it. Cause I thought that if I paid for everything, was my responsibility, because I never saw anybody pay for anything, right? Like I was paying for stuff at a young age. So like I thought as the head of the family, if I paid all the bills, that's all they needed from me. Right. And man, that was a tough lesson to learn. But at 27, you couldn't tell me anything. I was a millionaire and, just doing my thing. And then I woke up at 29. I didn't have $1 to my name 2 years later. Wow. I lost it all. So that was another valuable lesson, right?
Right.
Like I stopped working, Ian, when I was 27. I made all that money. I just had my business, but I really wasn't showing up like I was supposed to or doing the stuff that I did to get to that million. I thought that it would just keep doing it. I would sit in my basement and play PlayStation and smoke weed all day. That's what I did. Like I thought that, I thought I was the next big thing. I was
Right.
invincible, and then one day I wasn't. I was wholesaling off my cars, selling my Rolex watches, like doing everything I could to just keep my house, right? So like I learned some valuable lessons at 27, and luckily I was able to get back to where I was before, and have been able to sustain it pretty consistently since then.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a couple of things here in the last couple of minutes that
Mm-hmm.
are pearls of wisdom that we could dive deeper into, but a couple of them that stand out to me are it sounds like number one that you borrowed your grandma's belief,
Yeah,
and for a lot of us that's something that we need to learn that skill.
yeah,
That
agreed.
there are people out there that do believe in us, and if
Mm-hmm.
we can surround ourselves with them on those days where we don't feel like we're enough, or we have those limiting beliefs or that low self-esteem, that those people can actually build us up, and we can borrow their belief
Mm-hmm.
until we finally believe in ourselves. And I think that's a huge lesson for people to learn, and it's fortunate that
Yeah.
that you have that
I
fortunate.
want to go a little deeper with that because that's something I
Yeah.
do like to talk about a lot. And I talk about the transference of belief. Okay. So, like, we're all familiar with the transference of wealth, right? That generational wealth and whatever. But when it comes down to the transference of belief, and there's nothing more powerful than someone else saying they believe in you,
Hmm.
right? Like we don't hear that enough.
Right.
But what's more powerful is you believing in yourself. Okay. Like
Hmm.
I talk about, you see everybody saying, hey, man, if you just outwork everybody else, you're going to be successful. Okay. I'm not going to say that's not the truth,
Right.
but I'm inherently someone who's lazy. Like I like to watch TV and hang out and do nothing. Like I just can't help it. That's just my DNA. Now,
Right.
if someone's asked you, if you ask one of my friends, like, no, Chris works all the time. He's like going, but I do like really think about TV a lot. So, um, but so when someone says work, people get scared, right? They draw back. I don't have it in me to outwork everybody, Ian. Like I don't have it in me. But I think if you can outwork about half the people in the room, but outbelieve the other half, done deal, right? Like to me, being the greatest believer in yourself in the room is the way to win. Like there's no other way than that. So I believe in me, and I believe that whatever I decide I'm going to do, I go do it. And people say I'm crazy all the time. Like I left this wonderful position about 18 months ago. I had the dream, man. I worked when I wanted to. I had the big glass office. Everything you want, right? And then I just gave it all up because I wanted to be a full-time performance coach and keynote speaker. But my wife believes in me, and she's my number one fan. But I believed I could do it, so I
Yeah.
went and did it, and that's the road I'm on now.
Where do you feel that belief comes from? Someone who's listening or watching this
Yeah.
podcast, and they're like, "Well, okay, Chris, that's awesome. You've already had all the success before, so it's probably easy for someone like you to believe that you can go do those things. But for someone like me,
Mhm.
who is just your
Yeah.
average Joe, like how do I foster that belief that I can achieve some amazing, unthinkable things in my life?"
Well, I would say first of all, I still am a very average Joe. Um, I, I, I think about not making it. I think about what's going to happen if I don't. Like those thoughts are still there. I just had to figure out ways to overcome them, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're wanting to figure out the way to create the belief in yourself, you need to look back on times where you have won. Okay, and
Yes.
it could be anything. Like I was a great baseball player growing up, right? So I could go back and say, hey, I remember when I did X, Y, and Z. What did I do to be better than everybody else during that time period? Okay,
Right.
well, how can I implement that in what I'm trying to accomplish now, right? Or you can always look back in your history and find somewhere in your life where things were going great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, figure out what that was, and then re-engage that way in whatever it is you're doing. So I create the belief doing that. Look, it's so easy. Look, let me tell you something. I don't know if I ever said this on a podcast or not, but I wake up every morning in a negative state of mind. I can't help it. I lay in bed. I have all these negative thoughts in my head, and I've got to turn it around. I've always been that way. Like, what's going to happen next? Oh my gosh, what is this? What that? Like,
Yeah.
I have to literally center myself before I get out of bed, or I'm going to lose the day, right? So don't think that Chris gets up every morning and he's like, yeah, the world is mine. That is not the case, dude. Like, that's not it. I have to really fight to get there every single day. So look back where you've won. Look back at when you've hit your mark, and whatever it is. It can be the smallest thing in the world, but just recreate it again, right? Just use that as strength to get where you want to go. But also, don't forget what it feels like to win. That's one of the things. Yes. I had a client working the other day. He hasn't won in a long time. We went on a winning streak for 5 days. I'm like, do you remember how it feels to win now? He's like, oh my God, I forgot what it felt like to win. I said, okay, now remember what it felt like to lose last week? Yeah. I said, now we don't want to feel like that again, do we? But we can draw strength from that. So that would be kind of what I would suggest if you're saying the questions you just asked me.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to, we're talking about the transference of belief, also talking about the importance of the transference of emotion.
Yeah.
Like being able not just to remember the things that you were doing in that season of life when you were winning, but like you just mentioned, remember how it felt.
Yeah.
Remember that emotion so you can connect that. So you can have both a physical and a mental experience when you're remembering those wins to kind of draw that back into your now, into your reality. It's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner. Backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free Rinse PDF. Now, something else I wanted to ask you about is that you mentioned, or you said the word valuable. That made me think of value. And you were talking about how you were a millionaire and you lost it all.
Yeah.
And at that point, because we have a lot of people that that listen to this podcast or watch this podcast who have had their ups and they've had their downs, right? And it's easy to talk about when you're winning, but it's difficult to talk about the character of the person that you are when you're losing.
Yeah.
So how did you pull yourself out of that position where you had lost everything, and what was your sense of worth or sense of value at that point?
Well, when I was at the lowest point, it was very low. My sense of value is very low. I had this weird relationship with the amount of money I had was how much I was worth, like not just physically, but to everybody else.
Right.
Right. And once I was able to separate that I had more value regardless of the money mistakes I had made, regardless of the work I didn't do, I bring value when I step into a room. Now, how do I do that? Well, I work all the time to be better at my position and better at what I'm doing. I read all the time. I've got 2 coaches. I just do a lot of things to be better. Back then I didn't, but back then I did read. Like I started reading back then more. Finding secrets. People live secrets, right? I mean, success leaves secrets for sure. So what does that look like? Well, when I realized that being at rock bottom, like I'll go one more for you here. Like I had another company in 2005 that I was business partners with, that I was the money behind it originally. And we started taking off and things were going good. One of the business partners embezzled a bunch of money from us. He was taking all the withholding money that was supposed to go to the IRS. We had contracts with Rolls-Royce and all these different companies, and he was taking the money that was supposed to go to federal holdings and putting it in an offshore account for himself.
Wow.
Okay, well, the IRS showed up, of course. Eventually, they're going to. Unfortunately, he decided it'd be better for him to take his own life, and that's what he did. Then the IRS worked out a deal with us to get this paid off, which was an exorbitant amount of money. We get it paid off. I go on vacation. I come back, and my other two business partners decide to kick me out of the company. They put their shares together and kicked me out of the company. The guy who had all so here we go again, Ian, right? Like, it's like, what's happening? So, I had about 6 weeks there where I didn't know what I was going to do. I don't think I got out of bed most days, right? Like, I was just like so devastated. And then I just had to realize that this is just a bump in the road. It's another lesson. These guys are not going to make it without me. That was my mindset. And shocker, they went out of business 2 years later, and they're both have done 0 cents worth talking about. So then I went on to create another company and do something else. But I just had the resilience in me. I think it just comes from, again, growing up the way I did. And you can throw anything you want at me, but nothing's going to be as bad as growing up in the lifestyle I did. Like, you can steal from me. You can do these things, and I will take it incredibly personal because I wear my feelings on my sleeve when it comes to my business partners. I have no business partners anymore. All my companies are 100% mine. I'm just not interested.
Yeah.
But I learned those lessons along the way, and if that hadn't happened, Ian, I'd probably work in some boring job that I didn't like. And not doing the things that I do, life by design. I have a 13-month-old son. He's on the other side of my house right now with my nanny. I can hear him playing. I schedule playtime throughout my day. Mondays, I do 0 on Mondays. I just work on the business, so I don't have any scheduled calls usually. I think I did a call with you on a Monday for like 10 minutes, but that's about all I do. And I get up in the morning, I spend time with him, with Leo. So if I hadn't gone through all those crazy things, I wouldn't have what I have now, right? So go ahead, throw it at me. Give me your best shot. And we'll figure out a way to make it through. And I think that's what a lot of people need to understand is you're probably going through something real bad right now because there's something great on the other side, right? We really love the person we meet when we get through adversity. Okay, when we get through adversity, we love the person we meet. And but a lot of people don't have the strength. They back up, they turn into somebody else, they go to substances or whatever to try to make it through, and that's the story of their life.
Yeah, I think that you're a shining light on choosing which lens to look through, right? And
I agree.
choosing to look through everything that you've been through in your life and using it to make life happen for you and not take it as life happening to you.
True. Yeah, I think that's a big lesson I've learned the last few years from Ed Milet is life happening for me and not to me, which sometimes I don't believe that. I just in 2020, my son CJ passed away from cardiomyopathy hyperplasia, which is an enlarged heart. And there's nothing you could ever tell me that was happening for me. Like,
Right.
there's nothing like it. I'll never fully recover from that. But he's the driving force. He is one of the reasons I get out of bed in the morning because I know that he's watching me. Like, I know that CJ, he's my burn. Ian, you're familiar with that is, right? So he's my burn, and he's the driving force behind a lot of the things I've done. But yeah, so, I agree. Most things are happening for you, not to you, but some of them, I don't agree. I don't agree with that piece for sure.
Yeah, totally understandable. I want to talk about your book because I am fascinated
I'd love to.
this the premise of you just reaching out to like high level individuals and sending them a shoe, not just any shoe, but a single Jordan shoe, with a handwritten note and basically saying, let's hook up for a call or something. Let's connect somehow, and I'll send you the other shoe.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you come up with the premise, the idea,
Gosh,
and then just the cojones to to reach out to some of these individuals?
Well, I'm very brave, so I'm not afraid. You can tell me no. I've been told no before, so like whatever, like, you know.
Right.
Um, but I think one of the things is that first of all, I'd love to say that it was 100% my idea. It was not. I saw someone else talk about it on social media, and I'll break that down for us real quick. This is so funny. So I see a guy that I follow named Brad Lee on social media, and he's talking about different ways to connect with people. And I used to do this thing years ago when I was started in the mortgage business in the early 2000s, where I would take a book called Time Traps and I put a $20 bill in it. And I would mail it with a handwritten note to realtors or builders I wanted to meet with and says, hey, take this $20 bill for your time to read the letter. I'm going to call you tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss these strategies I learned from this book. Right? So I'd have it FedEx delivered. They would sign for it. And I did that and it worked. So I connected with this when Brad was talking about send one Jordan shoe and a note says, call me if you want the other shoe. And then he was talking about something else with a cell phone and these other things. I'm like, well, I'm a huge Jordan fan. That's my thing. Like my generation, Jordans meant something. Like they're a status symbol of a shoe, right? Like I remember, and in the book, I tell the story about the first pair of Jordans I ever bought. Like time stood still the day I got those shoes, right? So that connected with me. I mean, if I could turn the camera around, you'd go, dude, you have way too many shoes in there. Like, cause there's just a wall of shoes here. There's like probably 20 boxes there of shoes. And there's about 8 boxes over here, shoes getting mailed out. So there's a lot of Jordans in here. Yeah. So Jordan brand, if you're listening, I could use a sponsorship. But, so I was like, you know what? I felt like I'd outgrown my circle. And it was right about the same time I decided I was going to leave my corporate job. So it was all around the same time. So I'm like, how can I shorten the curve, right? To meet and connect with people, because that's what we really need to do is meet people and shorten the time it takes to meet them and get through the gatekeeper. Because these people that you want to connect with that I believe are some untouchable, they're impossible to get to. So I'm like, okay, well, how can I do this? So I'm at an airport I just got done giving a keynote in Charleston. And there's a hurricane in Florida where I live, so I had a 9-hour flight delay. So I'm sitting at this little airport, and I put together my list of who I wanted to connect with. And I called it the One Jordan list. And there wasn't a lot of like super notable people on there. In my world, they were people I wanted to meet, but not like everybody would know. So I started DMing people, trying to get their shoe size, right? I didn't have any women on the list. I never have, because I feel weird about asking a woman for a shoe size. I think that might come across creepy from a guy. Like, so women, if you're listening and you want to give me an idea how to do that, I'm all about it. There's a lot of women I'd love to connect with, but I feel like it might be a little weird. Like if someone asked my wife what her shoe size was as a guy on a DM, I'd be like, no.
Right.
So I started getting the shoe sizes back from people, and I sent off the first shoe. And I sent it to a guy named Damon West, who wrote the book, The Coffee Bean. And he responded. I get a phone call from this Texas number. I didn't answer because I don't answer numbers usually that are, I don't know. And he's like, Chris, Damon West, thank you so much for sending me the shoe. And I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Give me a call. So I call Damon. We have a conversation. He goes on my podcast. We're speaking on stage together a few weeks later. So like the same event. So I met him there with the shoe, and we've been buddies ever since. Like whenever he comes to town, he reaches out, and I talk to him throughout the year several times. So I think, okay, well that worked. Who should I do next? Ben Newman. There's this guy, Ben Newman, I follow on social media, and I need to meet this guy. And I talked to his support staff previously. I just called randomly and I said, hey, what's it cost to be coached one-on-one by Ben? I know I can't afford it right now, but what's it cost? And she told me, and it was Monique. I'm like, okay, Monique, thank you. And I reached out to her later and I said, hey, what's Ben's shoe size? She gives it to me and I send a shoe. I get a text message and it says, Welton, you got my attention. I'll do a call with you December 26th at 11 a.m. I'm like, that's Ben Newman, dude.
Right.
Done. So he sends me a link. We do a call. And it just goes off. I send the other shoe. Ben does the coolest thing ever. He sends one shoe back. He signs it for me. You can see it sitting behind me right here. That's the shoe I got back from Ben. It's got like standard over feelings and all this stuff on it from him and legacy, and Ben signed it.
Yeah.
And if you see any video of Ben when he shoots, from his desk, there's that shoe, the other shoe sitting right behind him.
Oh yeah.
That's the shoe that I sent Ben, right?
Okay.
So like that started this relationship with Ben Newman, who's one of the top performance coaches in the world. So I started going down this rabbit hole of like 6 or 7 straight people were like loving it. I'm like, dude, I should write a book about this. Okay. So I start writing a book about each individual story, right, of the people I connect with. Then I have my first person that doesn't respond or doesn't want the shoe. I had a guy send the shoe back. He did a call with me for 10 minutes, though, which ended up being a chapter in the book, which was probably the chapter I enjoyed to write the most. It's a guy named Dan Martell. And now I really love Dan. I follow Dan, and he's exactly who he says he is. But at first I was like, dude, don't you know who I am? I'm the one Jordan man. Like everybody says yes to me. Right. He said no, right? Lewis House sent the shoe back. He said no. Ed Milet never responded. I sent him both shoes and a signed copy of the book. I've never heard from Ed. I know he got it because I talked to his sister. But so the idea was to grow my circle, to change my circle, to evolve it, right? To meet new people. And I met some people that I didn't like once I met them, which is fine. But several people I've connected with and built these key relationships that have opened more and more doors. So I'm like, who's the person that has impacted my life the most? I've read the most of their books. John Maxwell. Okay, John Maxwell. For those who don't know who John Maxwell is, he's the GOAT. He's the greatest speaker on the planet, greatest coach ever on the planet when it comes to business and life. And he's written about 95 or 96 books. So I send a shoe to John Maxwell. Get a call from a number in South Florida. I don't answer those numbers because that's usually a warranty person trying to sell a warranty for my car. Don't need a warranty for my car, right? And it's Chris, John Maxwell. Send me the other shoe, buddy. I'm like, John Maxwell, call me. So I call John Maxwell. We have a great conversation. Send him the other shoe. Send him a copy of my book. Then I get this message, these DMs on Instagram and LinkedIn, people I've never met. They're like, hey, John Maxwell's on stage right now at a conference, and he's talking about getting out of the people pile. And he talks about this guy named Chris Welton who sent him one Jordan shoe. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? Like, John Maxwell is on stage talking about me.
Yeah.
So now I fast forward in Charleston last October. I gave a keynote on day 1. Day 2 of the event, John Maxwell gives the keynote. He comes off stage. He gives me a big hug. And him and I walk for 5 minutes or so to the next spot where he had to do some stuff for lunch. Have this great conversation. John Maxwell tells me he's proud of me. He loves me. And he's like, dude, he's like, Chris, we have to stay in contact. So I'm actually going to see him next week in Atlanta, Georgia. But I text John Maxwell all the time, like the GOAT, right? So I did these things to change my circle and to meet new people. Well, it's worked. Okay. So now I'm doing more of that, right? I have a list on my board here of people that I want to meet. You know, I teach the strategy. It's one of the things I speak about is the One Jordan strategy from stage. And it's just, you know, it's amazing what we've been able to accomplish so far. If anybody on the call listening, follow me on Instagram. I'm one hand at a time, all one word. If you DM me One Jordan, I will send you the One Jordan blueprint, right? That shows you how to create your One Jordan list, right? Free of charge. I'm not going to spam you to death or anything else, but just send it to me. My staff will send you over the PDF. But yeah, so that's the book. Sorry, I'm long-winded on that, man, but it's been a fun ride so far in that book.
No, I mean, that is the culmination of so many things that we talk about on the show of like persistence, clearly.
Yeah.
Stepping out of your comfort zone and, you know, what amazing things, as you have already mentioned, are on the other side of you doing that.
Yeah. Agreed.
You know, that is an amazing story. So I imagine that One Jordan is on Amazon and wherever else you can.
Yeah, it is. It's on Amazon. Or you can go to my website, which is chriswelton.live. You can buy a copy of it on my website, and you'll get an autographed copy personally from me. If you want an autographed copy, I don't know if autograph's worth anything, but some people want a signed copy of a book. So I'm happy to do that. Or you can just buy it on Amazon. We sell, God, I want to say we average about 700 to 800 copies a month are being sold still, which is pretty good a year later.
That's awesome.
I just had a company buy 300 copies the other day for me to sign at an event I'm speaking at. So yeah, I mean, it's out there. Check it out. And it was fun to write. I've got another version of that we're going to release next year, an updated version. It'll have Maxwell in it and some other people. But we'll have the new version come out in 2026.
That is awesome. That is amazing. Well, Chris, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to enlighten our audience, our viewers, and our listeners really on the power of positive persistence, because you certainly are a shining light and a shining example of that. So again,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of our listeners and our viewers for tuning into this episode. And remember that we always talk about stay positive, stay persistent, and remember that mindset is everything. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.